Story 1. The worst part about being poor is feeling stuck. It's hard to see a way out. Sometimes I feel like I'm missing out on a lot, but I try to stay hopeful. I know things can get better if I keep pushing. Just got to stay strong and keep grinding. Story 2. No peace and quiet. When I was broke, I had to live with roommates in a really bad area. There was always background noise from people gaming, cooking, watching TV, and so on. The area I lived in was bad enough that 3 people on my block had chained up pit bulls that barked constantly at each other and at passersby. To make it worse, I also accidentally rented near train tracks, and every few hours or so, I had to listen to train horns. The noise drove me crazy and was my #1 motivator to improve my living situation. Story 3. How expensive it is. Your car breaks down and you're in good financial shape. You probably have a newer car with a warranty on it, and excellent insurance to tow it to the dealer where it will be fixed for free while you drive the complimentary rental car. If you're poor, you have to pay for a tow truck. Then you have to take out a loan to pay for the fixes, which will be expensive because your car is high mileage and likely has multiple things broken at once. You miss work because you don't have a car, thus you are short on money this week. Then your bills will get behind. A simple breakdown may cause several months of additional financial hardship as you recover from it. Story 4. Lack of options. If you are poor, odds are you know poor people and have no connections. And connections can get you far, even if you initially don't have much money. Story 5. Just how expensive it can be to be poor. You can't afford decent insulation. You can't afford modern appliances. Your energy bills are going to be brutal. Your home will be freezing, which causes problems with mold and pipes bursting. And chances are you'll be stuck on the worst possible tariff because of your income. Can't afford a fridge? You're buying food fresh all the time. Can't afford a washing machine? You live your best EastEnders life and hang around the expensive laundrette. You can't afford a car? The bus gets very expensive. You are also paying extra for delivery charges, and the cheaper supermarkets like Aldi don't deliver, which means you're shopping at more expensive places like Tesco. Your local corner shop is also not economical. Alternatively, perhaps you do have a car, but it's 20 years old, which means the tax is higher than a modern car, the fuel economy is poor, and the emissions mean you're subject to the ultra-low emission zone and congestion charging in London, and high insurance because you live in a less affluent area. You also have to keep topping up the battery and reinflating that slow-punctured tire. It'll eventually break down or fall apart. There are fees to pay at that point, then you start again buying another one. You're overdrawn or late on payments. Here are some penalty fees. You want to move elsewhere for better prospects. You can't afford to. You want to take some courses for the same reason? Again, you cannot afford it. Story 6. Lacking the resources to change it. I'm only not dirt poor because of chance, luck, or favor. I performed a 5-minute comedy routine for the roadies setting up a concert, and one of them pitched me to production as a good guy to have around. Changed my life. Story 7. The stress of the situation reduces your ability to function and takes a toll on your health. Basic income was tested on a group of people where I live, a country generally considered to have decent social security, and the most common comment was that it enabled them to put much more effort into constructive things like finding a job and taking care of their health. High-stress situations are connected with a tendency to go for more, let's just get through this day solutions. Better decisions over time are made in more stable situations. Story 8. Currently sitting here wearing 3 jumpers and 2 pairs of socks because I can't afford to put the heating on. I'll put the oven on to cook dinner in a bit, so that should warm the house a bit. Story 9. Every little inconvenience is potentially life-changing. Flat tire? No work for you. Broken microwave? You've got to cook now. It's going to be 3 weeks before you can afford one. Maintenance schedule? We'll maintain it when it's too broken not to. Story 10. Lack of hope. We grew up without hope. Think about that for a minute. When your family, your grandparents, cousins, nieces, and nephews, generations are all stuck. There just isn't any hope to turn it around. I joined the army, and it was the first of many steps, but the most necessary step to get me on the path. Everyone dressed the same, ate the same food, and made the same salary based on rank. It gives you the opportunity to separate yourself from others. Back home, misery loves company. Everyone, including your parents, stands in your way of progress. If they can't do it, they don't want you to do it either. I am now an executive vice president. I go home. I hear from home. It's all the same as when I left. You have to separate yourself from all of it, or it will bring you down. A constant, lifetime struggle to not go back and lose everything you earned. For me, it started with the United States Army. Combat medic, airborne. Story 11. Watching others apply minimal or no effort and succeed greatly. 14-year-old streamers, TikTok influencers, the hawk to a girl. Here I am, grinding 40 hours a week, mostly making payments on time, but I'll likely never own a home or retire. Story 12. How it keeps you poor. Most ways out of poverty require planning and discipline. It is hard to stick to when you come home from a 12-hour manual labor job and just want to feel good before sleep and doing it again the next day. Story 13. Having to focus most, if not all, of your time and energy on survival mode, unable to move forward or make progress in the right direction. If the pit you are in is deep enough, you cannot get out without outside help. Story 14. Some have touched on it, but the worst thing about being poor is how it destroys relationships and wrecks marriages and families. The level of stress created by poverty is difficult to describe to anyone not in those circumstances. True poverty not only defines your own personal life, but the lives of everyone you know and every person you work with. It was hard for me to escape it, and it only happened after a ruined marriage and years of struggle. Had it not been for the happy circumstances of a couple of decent mentors and advisors, I would likely still be in poverty. This is the number one problem in America. Story 15. Being poor costs money. Can't afford a filling, so next year you need an extraction or root canal. Can't afford healthy food, so you have to go to the doctor or hospital. Can't afford new tires? You might get a ticket or have an accident. On and on and on. Story 16. There is just no break from stress. Even if you are fortunate enough to find a stable living environment, which more than likely took years to accomplish, you are only one bad event away from being homeless and at the bottom again. Story 17. You are not poor. Poor is a mentality. It's a mentality that very few people ever recover from. Don't you forget it, son. You are broke. Story 18. Everything is more expensive. Even grocery shopping, and you won't be able to access places where they are cheaper since you don't have a car, and paying for a taxi is not an option. The same is true for everything else. Even loans have higher rates. Everything is more expensive. You're stuck with bad choices. You know they are bad deals, but they're the only ones available to you. You know how to earn more money or do it in less time, but you lack the initial investment to do so. Story 19. I don't care about how people judge me because I make fun of rich or middle-class people all the time, but genuinely it's just not being able to afford anything and seeing other people doing amazing things, knowing you'll likely never be able to do it. Like, I have about $25 in my bank right now, and I don't get paid until next Friday, which, after I pay bills, will leave me with only about $200 for December, which includes having to buy Christmas presents for people and general food. I do some side jobs now and again where I get a little extra money, but I feel like I'm always just surviving. Story 20. The way people treat you. So many treat you like you are actively and happily making the worst decisions on purpose, when you are really just doing the best you can. Like someone else said here, the decisions you are making are, do we eat lunch or dinner? Do I fix the car or keep the lights on? You're already exhausted by having to put this much mental energy into every decision. You can't just plan ahead easily. Or if you are the child of poor parents and don't make any of the decisions, being treated like you are the one making these decisions. I had the rudest teachers. Story 21. The fact that you have to stay in a job that doesn't pay you enough to enjoy life, but you can't quit it either because you need that income, yet they can fire you at will and use that threat anytime they can when speaking down on you. I don't care about material things. It's that feeling that I hate and the mindless grind to support it. Story 22. The judgment from other people. For instance, I have food stamps. I make sure to get plenty of meat, frozen vegetables, canned goods, bread, butter, and so on. Then, because I value shop and am mindful of every penny spent, I decide to treat my family with subs, soda, and a bag of chips from the shop down the road. I can't tell you how many times I've had someone look at me and sneer, saying, Must be nice to blow my tax dollars on junk. I shouldn't have to do mental jumping jacks and justify that I've done my grocery shopping. My freezers are full, and this is a treat. Not to mention, I've also worked and paid taxes. It's just frustrating. People seem to think that just because someone has less than they do, that they are less than. Story 23. A lot of things like basic healthcare can be beyond you, and that causes massive issues down the road that are often far worse. You can't afford to do the things to prevent it from happening. You can't afford regular dentist visits, so what might be just a cleaning or filling at most is now a root canal or lost tooth. Story 24. The worst part of being poor is how expensive it is to be poor. You're buying food and supplies from places like Dollar General and Dollar Tree because you only have $30 a week for that stuff, and you're paying 2 to 4 times as much as it would cost in bulk or even at the grocery store, but you can't buy it from there. Even getting more money costs more money. Story 25. Not being able to resolve health issues because of the inability to afford proper health care. I don't consider myself poor, more like middle class, but even I had to refuse medication because I could not pay for it. I can imagine that poor people have to make these types of decisions frequently. Story 26. Watching those with wealth purchase extravagances that you know could make such a difference in other lives. When I see a picture of Mark Zuckerberg's statue of his wife and his yacht, all I can think of is the joy that wealth donated to a struggling family could bring and how it could change a life profoundly, like buying a child a computer, a poor family a house, or someone medicine. It's just disgusting how much money he and Elon Musk have. Story 27. The worst part about being poor isn't the lack of money itself, but the cascading effects it has. Constant stress, limited opportunities, difficult choices, and vulnerability to exploitation. It's a cycle of hardship that makes it incredibly difficult to improve one's circumstances. Story 28. The stress is the worst because you are constantly trying to make sure you do not end up homeless, and if a job decides to treat you poorly for tedious reasons, you can very easily end up on the street. Story 29. The worst part of being poor is having to live in a cold bedroom, your mother wrapping you tight in a blanket and then jumping in beside you in the bed to keep you both warm. Then having to get up the next morning and go to school to meet schoolmates talking about the show they watched the previous night on television while they were eating popcorn. Story 30. Not enjoying life. I've been stuck in this cycle for 10 years, and I'm about ready to blow my head off. I have no desire to grow or do anything anymore. Being poor has honestly defeated me. Story 31. Being poor is expensive. You cannot buy healthy food as it is more expensive. You bounce checks or get hit with insufficient funds, you get late fees for missing payments, you cannot afford to go to the doctor, and you watch your kids eat while there is not enough food for you. Story 32. The cost of being poor is a real thing. Poor quality products wear out and break faster, requiring costly replacement. High interest rates bleed off what little expendable cash you may be able to amass. A minor emergency requires a credit card, which charges exorbitant interest and fees. Being poor is expensive on so many levels. Story 33. The safety issues that come with it. Cannot afford to live in a safe neighborhood, so there is more crime. More possibility of having what little you do have stolen or wrecked due to burglars and addicts. Story 34. We've had times where we could get our children anything they want, and times where we didn't know what we were going to eat for dinner. The worst part about being poor is your children not understanding that you can't even afford to get them a Happy Meal when they're too young to understand how money works. And what is even more frustrating is that the easiest way to avoid having to explain this to them is to lie and say it's closed today. It is distressing. I never want to be there again. Story 35. Watching people happy for the holidays while you get nothing because you cannot afford it. Hearing people brag about what their families did during the holidays while you stayed home because you cannot afford to get anything for anybody. The shame of not being able to see your family because it's embarrassing not to be able to get gifts. Story 36. I grew up poor, wearing mismatched clothes that didn't fit, not having food until the beginning of the month that barely lasted, not being able to be in sports, and every kid making fun of me for being poor. I worked really hard to get where I am now, especially for my kids. I am a single mom, and the first thing I can finally say is money really is not an option for me. I am very frugal, but my kids have never and will never have to go without. My job is beyond stressful, but it is worth it to know if my kids need something, I can go out and buy it. I don't have to rely on the government to feed or house myself or my kids. Growing up poor in the 1990s was awful. I can't imagine what bullying my kids would face in today's world. We are also the first to help anyone in need without questions asked. Story 37. When I was a kid, being poor meant being tormented and bullied by other kids for numerous reasons, never having food in the apartment and wondering when we would have to move yet again and start over at another school knowing no one and having a hard time making friends. The fear of never knowing if and when we would ever have the stability of a permanent home and my single mom having a steady income. It meant being ashamed and secretive about our living situation and not wanting friends to visit. It meant understanding how important that child support payment was, but not knowing why my dad wasn't doing his part for me and my brother. It meant only having a Thanksgiving dinner thanks to a free turkey someone would donate or my mom's employer would hand out. Washing my clothes in the bathtub because there wasn't enough money for the laundromat. The saddest part was that I knew and understood all of this and more before I was 12.